Brightspace is the LMS that helps you reach every learner. It makes teaching and learning easier by letting you focus on what's most important, your students and their experience. You can start building courses quickly by simply dragging and dropping content into them. And even create content right in the system, like adding images or videos with just a few clicks. The responsive interface looks great on a laptop, tablet, or smartphone, and it works on any device. Brightspace also lets you teach the way you want. Built-in communication tools let you create a connected learning experience with homepage news feeds, online discussions, and web conferencing. And whether you're fully online, blended, or flipped, Brightspace lets you use lots of different pedagogical approaches, like competency-based education and gamification. It helps you work smarter too. Built-in analytics lets you quickly check on how everyone in the class is doing. You can also dive deeper to review individual performance in more detail. And with smart rules and smart tools, you can automatically trigger activities based upon what a student does or doesn't do to personalize their learning experience. Easy, flexible, smart. That's Brightspace.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vikas Pota, and welcome to T4tv. It seems a mighty long time since you and I spoke, and I hope you've had, if you've had a summer break in the Northern Hemisphere, that's what it is. I hope you've had a pleasant and relaxing one. I know that schools have gone back in England, and things are about to shoot through the roofs, including our R rates for COVID. But nonetheless, we are determined and committed to making sure we bring forward friends of ours from around the world who come and tell us and share with us actually what they've been thinking about, what they've been doing. And today's guest is someone I'm really excited to have, who will discuss the very, very important subject about leadership. We often talk and we often rue that the world has a leadership vacuum. And today we have someone who's done a PhD and is going to present some of her research and her findings on what good educational leadership looks like and how we ought to be thinking about it. But before I bring her on, I want to make sure that I make sure that everyone understands what's going on today. And so if you are watching this on Facebook, in our big Facebook group, I request you to go to this link, streamyard.com/Facebook, because when you do comment, then we can actually see your name and your profile pic, and I think that makes it more interactive. So you may want to do that. You're welcome to join our LinkedIn group, which is called T4 Education in Our World. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We can, if you're not watching this on our Facebook group, you can join our Facebook group as well. And of course, we have Twitter accounts that you can also follow. Now, for the past few months when we've been doing this, in fact, most of this year, it's been very much me as a solo, actually speaking to my friends and people that I've met around the world who I admire greatly. And what we are now doing for this format, T4tv, is bringing in guest hosts. So earlier in the week, you will have seen a friend of mine called Hiba Balut from Lebanon, who was the first T4tv guest host. And she is now expanding these interviews to include her friends and people she admires and interviews them. Now, the offer really, I suppose, is we're looking for others who want to be T4tv hosts. If you do, then please do raise your hand and do let me know. Earlier this week, we also did something quite remarkable in that we got our communication sorted. We have a very small team at T4 headquarters, if you want to call it that. And that team has been working night and day to make sure that our World Education Week program is launched, which it is now, I'm pleased to see. And I would say that we've probably had about 5,000 tickets already booked for these 100+ events, which make great professional development. I should tell you that you will miss out if you don't participate and take the opportunity to understand what schools around the world are doing to develop and share their expertise. You can register online for World Education Week at worldeduweek.org, as it says at the bottom of the screen, and help us celebrate the expertise and the specialism and the achievement of these 100 schools. And it goes without saying, this is a great professional development opportunity. So without further ado, I want to introduce today's guest, who is a prolific school principal called Shanti Clements from Australia. She is the principal of a school called Seven Hills West Public School, and she has over 27 years of experience working in education, in personal development and leadership research. Her career highlights include facilitating leadership programs, developing leadership pathways, and accreditation programs for aspiring leaders, principals, and senior executives across the world. Her leadership roles include principal of the Beauty Point Public School, principal, and it goes on and on, basically. But more than anything else, she's also an award winner. She has been conferred the Australian Schools Plus or Commonwealth Bank Teaching Award and Inaugural Leadership Fellow, and she's also a National Excellence in Teaching Award recipient. Without further ado, please welcome Shanti Clements. Shanti, hi, good morning, and good evening to you.
Thank you, Vikas.
It's a pleasure. Fantastic, Shanti. I'm an Englishman. I'm going to start off the interview by asking, what is the weather like in Australia today? Because for us, we've had our 3 days of summer, where the sunshine has now ebbed and we now have grey, rainy skies. Tell us about what it's like where you are.
Oh, you'll be very envious. It was very sunny today, very warm. The sun was streaming. However, it's now 6:10 p.m. in the afternoon or evening in Sydney. So we're now in the sunset zone and it's darker. But it was a beautiful day.
Wonderful. And you'll be pleased to know that we have friends from all over the world who are already watching and have commented. So forgive me, I don't read Arabic, but hello from Syria. We have Anjum Safdar, who is saying good afternoon from Abu Dhabi. We have Ahiba saying good afternoon. We have my friend Amit Patel from the UK saying good morning. We have Nino Kalandia from Georgia. And on it goes. We have Albania. We have Bangladesh. We have someone from Nigeria. And this is what I mean by giving StreamYard permissions. I can't see your name. Mikkel is from Denmark. Hi, Mikkel. How are you, my friend? Lovely seeing you. And obviously, Asnaha from says hello. Now, Shanti, I often talk about the leadership vacuum that exists in our world. And usually I mean political leadership. We look at the world over and, politics is kind of letting people down quite massively. But again, the same principles don't necessarily apply, but the same argument can be carried, which is, we have what I understand what you're saying is we have a huge amount of work to do in the leadership development space. And given that the audience for today's program are teachers and educators from around the world, tell us in terms of what your research tells us about leadership development.
Okay, thank you, Vikas, and welcome everybody. I wish I could see you in person as well. Vikas, even though I actually am currently living in Australia, I was responsible for setting up the leadership strategy for the New South Wales Department of Education, which is the largest organisation or educational organisation in the Southern Hemisphere, and then very lucky to work in the Middle East. I saw Abu Dhabi there, worked in Egypt as well as Saudi. I've worked with the US principals and leaders in the Middle East as well as Indian and African school leaders. And what I've noticed is that all of us have a common challenge. And that challenge is, how do we handle the changes, the uncertainty, the challenges that are coming from 21st century living, the changes to society, politics, as you mentioned, as well as education. And the challenge is, how do we prepare school leaders to lead with resilience, with confidence, and the ability to manage change and complexity so that they can bring their communities on board with them to improve the educational outcomes we need to for our students. Despite different standards across many different countries and education systems, the common area or the gap is, how do we build the confidence and the inner leadership and the strength and the self-concept of educational leaders?
Shanti, forgive me for poking you a little bit. Is there a leadership crisis in education?
I believe there is a leadership crisis, and part of the crisis is that the nature of what we define as leadership within the educational field is different to what it was 20 years ago. We've got changing definitions of what a school principal or a head needs to do. There's different expectations that are coming from society, different political and educational reforms. And the difficult thing is that everybody has an opinion about what good education is, because we've all been to school. And, you know, you'll see it in the media, you'll see it when you're in the taxi, everyone's got an opinion. So educational leadership is a hard one, because I think we're redefining the space, and we're also redefining what is effective leadership.
And so, and I think you and I had this discussion just before we went live. At least in the West, in the UK where I live, we have a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. Lots of teachers leave quite rapidly within 5 years of becoming teachers. And we also find it a struggle to recruit teachers. Does the same, do you think, exist for the role of headship in a school?
Yes. And I do think that the trend that we see in Australia is being replicated overseas, because you actually do have the number of people who are in principal positions. They are at an older age. There's a huge rate of, there's the trend of retirees that are about to emerge, and the ability to replace the head positions is becoming increasingly difficult. You mentioned how a lot of teachers are leaving the profession in the first 5 years. That's also having impact on the number of teachers who are wanting to go into promoted positions as well. And so with the changing nature of what a principal stands for, the increasing pressures and the perception that the job is quite overwhelming, that's actually putting off a lot of people from stepping into promotions.
So, Shanti, tell us a little bit about your research.
Well, Vikas, I'm really excited about this research because having spent the last 2 years previously working in the Middle East and training international leaders, what I noticed and what I observed across many different countries was that you can have a leadership framework. You could have expectations for each education system and standards. But the biggest challenge was to support leaders in their development and their confidence as leaders. Specifically, I'm talking about, how do we prepare leaders well? How do we support them across the career span? Because most of the emphasis is on preparing novice principals. And then often professional development or training that occurs once the principal has the job is about implementing system reforms. What we've noticed is that principals, regardless of whether they're a first year, novice, whether they're experienced or experts, need important rejuvenation points. And those rejuvenation points are essential to enhance their capabilities, their mindsets, as well as their resilience. So in building leader identity across the career span, not just to prepare a new principal, it actually helps build their ability to have influence and in the result, greater impact at a school level.
So tell us, take us through your slides that you have.
Okay. So most importantly, people will say, why leader identity development? Well, leader identity development brings together the whole person into the principal position. It's about uplifting the mindsets and the capabilities so that principals are able to make better choices, and they also have the understanding of complexity so that they can actually build shared alignment with their teams, support staff well-being, bring the communication skills together so they can engage their community, and in the end, create that uplift that we want to see with student outcomes. So it's really about how do we work together with people, how do I know myself, and how do I know others and bring us together for this shared journey and for a collective moral purpose. And in doing that, it's about ensuring that we address the gap that currently exists in education systems, and that is that when we prepare leaders, we go beyond what is the normal process of just developing an ability to understand the professional accreditation or the education system expectations. It's about helping the leaders or the aspiring leaders to be ready, to know what readiness looks like, to know that they've got the technical skills, the interpersonal skills, as well as the self-knowledge to know how they handle pressure. So it's very much about how do we address that gap between the optimal state and the typical state in day-to-day practice. As part of that, if we look at leader identity formation, it's about expertise development across the whole career span. So it's about adult learning, not just at the beginning stages of leadership, but when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, so that we can create these highly evolved leaders who are able to transfer their knowledge into maturity and into leadership wisdom. And by doing that, we then create not just school improvement, but school transformation. If we move on to it, it's very much around understanding that the journey of leadership includes the journey throughout 7 action logics. And each of those action logics has a particular set of characteristics and strengths that support leadership, not just from the inside, but how a leader works with their teams. So if we look at this, I think you can see it on the screen there, the opportunist, the diplomat, expert, achiever, individualist, strategist, and alchemist. And it's about building on each of those different action logics so that we get to embed the strengths of them, so that at the end, whenever there's a complex or a challenging situation, you've got 7 layers of leadership to choose from. And it strengthens the choices that we make in those conditions. The other aspect of it is that those 3 modes of leadership that you see on the side support the organisational component of leadership. And I'm going to take you to the reason why it's essential that we do that. Because as a leader grows in their own identity formation, they impact on the culture of the school that they're creating. So if you're focused only on the achieving mode, you're working more on that reactive level. You're looking at problems and trying to come up with a solution. As you shift and move in towards the adaptive modes of leadership, we start to look at the vision and the strategy. We start to see leaders who have a passion and are focused on purposeful change. And as leaders keep evolving, if they get to the enabling level, this is when the time shifts. We go from months to years to someone who wants to have greater impact over decades. Here, the shift is where we go from system and design principles to have a greater global impact. So these leaders go into that self-transforming mode where they've got deep self-awareness. They're driven by compassion and equity and fairness for all, not at a local level, but at a global level, which is why I believe that motivation is to be that global change agent to transform societies as well as systems and the future.
It'd be interesting to take some questions from any of you who are watching, if you have any. So please put them in the comments box. I assume many of you are teachers or leaders in some guise. Give us your reactions. Please continue, Shanti.
So, Vikas, when I'm talking about identity, if we do understand ourselves, the fact is a leader is not one person. We've got multiple identities. Humans are complex individuals. We have our own personal identity. Who we are at home, who we are at work, who we are with our colleagues, who we are with the communities that we're working with. So it's about understanding, how do I operate under pressure? How do I operate in my best times, my worst times? How do I bridge that gap? And the answer comes from identity formation. And why I believe it's so critical in education is that the corporate research has been ahead of us for about 10 to 20 years. They've done studies that have shown that the more self-awareness, the more that a leader operates from a creative mindset, the greater their impact. The Harvard Business Studies have shown that if you choose your mode of leadership, you actually have a greater potential to have a higher return on investment. So if you look at that visual that I'm showing you, if you operate only at that achieving mode, which 80% of our world leaders and our educational leaders are at, you might have a great goal that you want to achieve, but you're only going to continue to maintain the status quo. As you start to grow in your own development to the adaptive modes, you start to improve your capacity to influence others and therefore have greater impact. And so the leaders who are at the adaptive and the enabling level not only improve their return on investment, but the organisational culture profiles and staff morale and well-being are also enhanced. The themes that come out of leaders who operate that way with that creative mindset brings together Eastern and Western values for leadership, where you not only grow yourself, but you grow others. So they've got, as you see there, strong people skills. They're visionary. They go beyond the status quo. They think differently. They go outside the box. But they're also good listeners. They distribute leadership, and they align their teams with a very strong, compelling vision for change. And the research has confirmed this in educational literature, as well as in the leadership in New South Wales. I've seen this also when I was in the Middle East. And I hope you can see that red dotted line there.
Mm-hmm.
That trend line is showing that the higher the leadership maturity score, which is their leadership identity formation, the higher the impact a leader can have in improving their school's performance results. And in the research that I just recently conducted, these are the top 5 creative mindset competencies. These leaders are purposeful and visionary. They have a strong strategic focus, but they can put it into action so they can deliver it. It's not talk, it's got follow through. High levels of integrity. In other words, if I say I'm going to do something, I will, and you can trust me. So they build relationships. The strong relational trust is just evident in the school cultures. Their focus is on mentoring and developing others, not their next career move. And as a result, their teams are aligned. They've got embedded systems and processes that actually achieve results. And it's really interesting because when you look at those creative mindset competencies, which again are reinforced in the corporate research, you don't really see this unpacked in principal preparation programs. A lot of the standards and the accreditation, they've got themes of improvement, and usually with a political or a educational reform lens. But this is, how do I grow myself as a person to have greater impact and influence with the people I work with? And that's really a snapshot of the research, Vikas.
And so, Shanti, I mean, if we were to do a leadership clinic of those people watching this, this show, not everyone has an opportunity to undertake this journey on their own, free will. And so, say if I'm a teacher in a school and I want to go up this pathway, what is the first step I take?
Look, the key to all of this is being curious to know who I am and to be curious.
There's that phrase, curiosity killed the cat.
Well, you see, that's a really interesting one. And if people were to look at the different action logics, sometimes ignorance is bliss. However, when we start to be open to reflect on who we are as leaders, to look at what we do under the best and the worst conditions, to see how I act under stress or when other people around me are under stress. If we start to look at that with self-awareness, we develop greater consciousness and ego development. So the first key is to actually be open to the journey. And there's this, in some of the research, because I used 3 different tools. One tool was the Leadership Maturity Framework tool. And that tool tells you your lens of the world and how you view the world. Thank you, Mikkel. The second one was the Leadership Circle Profile, which is a culture survey, because most leaders do not take on feedback from their peers. Usually leadership is, I'll give you feedback, but I don't ask for your feedback to reflect on how I can do things better. So it's got to be two-way, backwards, flipping up and down, top down, bottom up. And the third thing is there's this concept called Bildungsromans, which is where you have stories of professional actualization. Imagine if we flipped it so that instead of coaching where an external person tells you what your goal should be, you come up with a goal based on leadership identity formation, where you say, okay, I'm a new principal. This is where I'd like to see myself be in 20 years' time. Write my journey, which could almost be seen as an affirmation, but use that to guide and benchmark my journey of leadership actualization. So you can bring the creative into it as well.
Thank you. Mikkel asked 3 questions. So let's go through each one together because I think they were great. Question 1, does an educational leader need to have a background as a teacher?
Okay, I think in understanding the field or the content knowledge, the education background helps. But to be a leader doesn't necessarily have to have that education content knowledge, because in the end, the leader has to be able to work with people. They have to bring people on board with them. The content knowledge helps, but it's interesting, when I was working in the Middle East, I saw some great educational leaders who came to education very late.
I think the difference isn't the difference that they tread the boards in a classroom and they've stood in front of a classroom and taught. And what Mikkel is saying is a fair point, which is, what if you've not actually taught? Can you become an education leader? I mean, how can you relate to the challenge?
But the definition of what an educational leader is changing. 20 years ago, that educational leader needed to be an outstanding teacher, needed to be a role model for curriculum design, instructional teaching, someone who definitely made an impact on student learning outcomes. And I followed that model. But more and more, you're actually seeing the role of the principal changing, where half of the job is actually business, it's financial, it's organizational strategy. And a lot of people who've been trained the traditional way struggle because they haven't got the skill sets to do the leadership in this era of education. So how do we ensure competencies in technology management for education? Okay, so this is really good, Mikkel, that you're asking this question, because identity formation has a different set of skills that we need to learn. And so if we keep using the 7 lens of leadership as a touch point, it means that we actually rejuvenate leaders so they don't get tired, they don't become negative, they don't become disillusioned. It means you've always got that refreshed leader who's interested to learn new things. And I do think that the competencies, or those technical or those technology or management skills, are things that leaders would be more open to if we actually flipped the way that we do training and development for principals. And then we're talking about sustainable funnel that ensures teacher competencies, basic teaching, didactics, STEAM, ICT. Okay. Yes, we definitely need that, and I know a lot of leaders need that. How many times have you actually gone on a Zoom with principals where they don't know how to use the Zoom? I think didactics is really important, but I think getting the balance right. It's a bit like, if we look at John Hattie's visible learning research, the ability to use ICT, the ability to use STEAM, and all these are fantastic skill sets, but the greater ability is how do we translate that out to have impact? So I think the challenge is impact.
So a couple of people, Oliver as well as Michael, are asking for your slides. Shanti, will you, after this talk, after this T4tv show, will you go into all the social media channels and actually put up a link like a Google Drive or a Dropbox or something like that?
Absolutely.
And so that people can look at it. So in our large Facebook group, on our LinkedIn, on our YouTube, if you just go and just paste yourself, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And so, Shanti, sadly, we have run out of time. There are so many questions that I want to ask, and I know that we have discussed the difference in leadership thinking between Western traditions and Eastern traditions, and I'd like to get into that a little bit. Can I just quickly ask you a question on that? What do you think the nub of it is?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
In summary, what is the difference between Western thinking on leadership and Eastern thinking on leadership?
So if we look at the traditional concept of Western leadership frameworks, the difference is that the Western focus is extrinsic. We develop leaders for the external characteristics that we want to see in them. And it comes out of the industrial age model, where we have an organizational concept of what the leadership traits should be. But it's outdated because organizational entities are not static. They're not stable like they used to be in the 20th century. So as a result, those models of leadership development that were effective in the past are not as effective now. The Eastern frameworks of leader development is about the intrinsic. It's the inner journey of the leader, and that inner journey is there to grow the leader so that they can flourish and also enable other people to flourish. So the focus is about self-awareness. It's about building the team. It's about helping the team create a shared culture, and also about their well-being and morale. So if you bring the intrinsic and the extrinsic together, then you've got what I would call a globally inclusive approach that values Eastern and Western methodologies in a way that actually probably is essential if we're going to manage the 21st century complexities and challenges and ongoing rapid change that we're dealing with. Sorry.
No, go and carry on, please.
I'm just going to say the other aspect about the Eastern leadership frameworks is that it's about trying to have a strong wellbeing focus for the leader so that they become highly evolved so they can flourish and thrive and choose an optimal state. Now, that optimal state depends on the context, whereas in the leader development state, we're looking at technical skill sets, not necessarily the interpersonal.
Right. Shanti, I would be remiss in not asking you this question. And so when we talk about leadership, I'm pretty clear as to my mentors and people who have inspired me or actually guided my leadership journey. Who are the one or two people in your life that have had such an instrumental impact that you want to give a shout out to?
Okay, well, the first person is my father. My father was a teacher, and my father was also, I'm half Indian, and he was a spiritual teacher as well as an English history teacher. And he taught me the importance of Eastern frameworks, the Vedic psychology framework. And the second person, I must say, is my husband, who's an outstanding educator and has not only helped shape educational practices in Australia, but has done that overseas. Third person, I don't know, but I absolutely am so influenced by him, and I will say Gandhi.
Yeah, my mother would respond to you saying, "There's no such thing as a half Indian." Shanti, thank you so much for participating today. Mikhail says thank you so much, and I echo that. I know people, like I said, are watching from all around the world, right? And so we have someone from the Philippines Ministry of Education. We have, from Milano in Italy, and so on and so forth. I think it's pretty cool when you have these kinds of capabilities in today's life using technology to reach such a wide audience. So I know that your presentation and your thoughts have been very welcome. I want to end today's T4tv show by talking about World Education Week again. And please, I'd like to put in front of you this humongous opportunity that exists. And actually, Shanti and her school are also showcasing during World Education Week. And so you should definitely register for her event. Shanti, do you remember the date and time of your event, which is on the grid on Eventbrite?
I don't know our exact time that it's on, but we are so excited. We're absolutely excited to represent Australia, and we know that we've got 6 schools from Australia that are part of it. We know there's going to be Eddie Wu joining, and the opportunity to connect is going to be absolutely fabulous. So thank you, Vikas. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Not at all. And Shanti, thank you so much. And we look forward to future opportunities speaking to you. That's it for today. Thank you all very much for participating today. And we will look forward to the next show. Goodbye.